Hello everyone, this is CA Sumit R Bharadia from Kalaburgi, Karnataka. I'm a practicing chartered accountant since 2019. I thank CA V.A. Kuranaji for the opportunity and the entire team of CA Sansaar for this wonderful opportunity. Today's topic for discussion is e-invoicing under GST. So basically, we'll be covering the following topics, namely what is e-invoicing, why e-invoicing, benefits, applicability, non-applicability, statutory provisions, RCM transactions, uh, how to check the applicability of particular GST and documents and which are covered and not covered, how the e-invoicing flow in the system, what are the components, time limits, and various challenges and validations. Let's start it. Basically, e-invoicing in a layman language is any document generated via computer. This is what the layman language definition of ease of e-invoicing. But for the GST, e-invoicing is nothing but it is a B2B invoicing system which is authenticated by the GSTN via a common GSTN portal. As you can see in the PPT, the supplier uploads the invoice on the notified portal, which is IRP, Invoice Registration Portal. In return, it sends the signed invoice along with IRN and QR code, and the same is issued to the buyer. So why e-invoicing? As we see in various enterprises, various type of softwares are being used like Tally, Mark, ClearTax, Vapar, Zoho, and there are n number of software for e-invoicing and accounting. Every software has got its own way of accounting and invoicing, and this gives a basic necessity of standardization of format. So this e-invoicing was introduced in order to make a standardized format for electronic interoperability of data. What are the benefits of e-invoicing? The benefits of invoicing are various. It is like the auto capturing of GSTR1. It is the seamless e-way bill Part A and Part B filling, and the standard invoicing, which is the basic criteria like interoperability between multiple software, and there is a minimum invoice mismatch during reconciliation. Easy ITC claim because it is auto populated in the GSTN portal, and it increases efficiency in tax administration by eliminating fake invoices. Initiatives like invoice financing by use of invoice as collateral. Let's now look at the applicability of e-invoicing. To whom is e-invoicing applicable? It is applicable to any registered person, but it has been rolled out in a phased manner starting from October 2020 when the aggregate turnover limit was 500 crores. And then it came down to 100 crores from 1st January 21 and then 50 crores from 1st April 21. And now it has been applicable to any registered person having aggregate turnover exceeding 20 crores from the 1st of April 2022. Now let's come to this. What is aggregate turnover for this e-invoicing calculation? Aggregate turnover means all the taxable, exempt, export of goods and nil rated, exempt, every type of supply is included in the definition of aggregate turnover, but excluding the cess and taxes. As per the notification 70 bar 2020, the aggregate turnover in any preceding financial year starting from 2017, that is from the date of applicability of GST Act, that is from July 2017. If you cross 20 crores as of now from the 1st April, if you cross 20 crores turnover in any financial year from 2017, e-invoicing is applicable for lifetime. That is condition once. That is turnover condition is once, but e-invoicing is applicable for the lifetime. To whom is e-invoicing not applicable? E-invoicing is not applicable to the following categories of registered person irrespective of their turnover. Those are the SEZ unit, banking company, insurance, NBFC, GTA, goods transport agencies, passenger transport services, admission to multiplex cinema. So the non-applicability is qua entity and not qua supply. By this we mean whole entity as a unit is exempt from e-invoice and the particular supplier are not exempt. Like in case of GTA, all the services provided by the GTA will be exempt. Like the basic objective of GTA is the goods transport, but they also invoice for the Hamali charges, loading, unloading. Even those are exempt from e-invoicing. This is called as qua entity and not qua supply. Non-applicability of e-invoicing for particular transactions like import bill of entry, B2C. B2C transaction e-invoicing is not applicable. And also non-GST supplies like alcoholic liquor, petrol and other e-invoicing is not applicable. What are the transactions to be reported under e-invoicing? Supplies to the registered person, that is B2B and also B2G. B2G, business to government. Supplies to SEZ with or without payment of taxes. Exports with or without payment of taxes. Deems export, reverse charge mechanism. For all these transactions, e-invoicing is mandatory. E-invoicing for RCM transaction. RCM transaction, there are three cases. First is by the unregistered person. Second is by the e-commerce operator. Third is by the for the notified goods. So, in whom e-invoicing is applicable. Let's see by this chart. RCM. RCM is basically into two categories, 9394. Section 94 is always from the supply from unregistered person. As the supplier is unregistered, it will be a B2C transaction, and hence, if B2C, no e-invoicing is applicable. And now let's come to section 93, list of goods on which RCM is specifically applicable. In this case, there are two scenarios. The person is a registered supplier, it is an unregistered supplier. In case of unregistered supplier, as this is a B2C, no e-invoicing is applicable. And in case of registered supplier, as invoice is issued and GST is paid by recipient under RCM, the supplier is liable to e-invoicing if he is mandated, that is turnover exceeds 20 crores. So we can conclude that if a supplier is an unregistered person, in that case, e-invoicing is not applicable. In case of e-commerce operator, if it is a B2B transaction, then e-invoicing is to be done by the e-commerce operator. And in certain cases, as notified by the CBIC, if supplier is liable for e-invoicing mandate, then he will have to generate the IRN. Now let's come to the statutory provision, basically the Rule 48, manner of issuing invoice. Earlier there were three sub-rules, sub-rule 1, 2, 3. Sub-rule 1 states for triplicate copy, that is for supply of goods, 3 copies needs to be made of invoices, original for recipient, duplicate for transporter, and triplicate for supplier. And sub-rule 2 of Rule 48, it is for supply of services to be made in duplicate, original for recipient, duplicate for supplier. And sub-rule 3 states of the serial number to be furnished in electronic form. Now for e-invoicing, sub-rule 4, 5 and 6 have been introduced. Sub-rule 4 states that invoice shall be prepared by the such class of registered person, that means whose turnover exceeds the limit as specified, in such format, that is the schema form GST INV01 after obtaining the invoice reference number. Invoice reference number is given by the IRN. Invoice reference number IRN is given by the invoice registration portal, that is the GSTN. This is given by sub-rule 4. Sub-rule 5 states that every invoice issued by a person to whom sub-rule 4 is applicable, that means to whoever e-invoicing is applicable, such person has to mandatorily issue e-invoice in the form specified. If and sub-rule 6 states that sub-rule 1 and 2, that is duplicate and triplicate need not be prepared. So from sub-rule 5 we get to know that if a person to whom the e-invoicing is applicable does not prepare the e-invoice and issues normal invoice, such invoice is not treated as a valid invoice. Statutory provision, Rule 48, sub-rule 4. There are 4 components. Notified class of registered person, that is the turnover limit. Invoice in form INV01, that is the schema. Upload on IRP, that is the invoice registration portal. Generate IRN, that is invoice reference number. These are the 4 parts of sub-rule 4. Now it is necessary to check the applicability of your supplier, because if he does not issue an e-invoice, if it is applicable to him, then such invoice is not a valid invoice as per the sub-rule 5. So to check this applicability, you need to visit e-invoice1.gst.gov.in, and in the search bar you can see the e-invoice status of taxpayer, and in which you can write the GST of your supplier and check. In this case, you have checked it and it says that e-invoice is not enabled. That means he has not crossed the turnover as per the system. And here we have taken another example of Britannia Industries. It states that you are enabled for e-invoicing from 1st October 2020. But applicability check specifically states that the criteria here is as per the computation from the GST system. It may be correct or may be wrong, but the ultimate liability to do invoicing is based on the registered person. This website is only for the reference purpose. What are the documents covered in e-invoicing? Tax invoice, credit notes, debit notes, export invoice, even if exempt. Generally, we have seen that if it is exempt, no e-invoicing is to be done. But in case of export invoice, e-invoicing is mandatory. What are the documents not covered in e-invoicing? Receipt voucher, refund voucher, payment voucher, that is RCM liability, bill of supply, that is for the exempt supply, and input service distributor. Now let's see e-invoicing flow, how the e-invoicing system flows. First, the supplier uploads and first the supplier prepares his invoice in his system and then uploads to the invoice registration portal. Invoice registration portal, what it does is it validates the data, it generates the IRN and sends the invoice to the GST system. GST system checks for the existing IRN, that is for the duplication check. Then it is posted to the buyer's 2A. And now from the GST system, it is auto-populated in the GSTR1 of the supplier, and IRP adds QR code and a JSON file is generated. The receiver gets in return JSON file with IRN and QR code. Even e-invoicing details, if we have put the part A and part B details, even that is generated along with this. Now come to the components of e-invoice. There are four major components to e-invoicing. IRP, that is invoice registration portal, IRN, invoice reference number, digital signature, QR code. Invoice registration portal. This acts as a registrar between the supplier and the GSTN. This basically only allocates the IRN number and assigns QR code. This is only a registration portal. It does not generate anything on its own. The data which the supplier provides to the invoice registration portal, it is processed and a QR code and IRN is generated via this. Basically, the IRP is a watchman. That is, it only sees the data which flows and it gives the data back. IRN, invoice reference number. Invoice reference number is a unique number generated from the invoice registration portal. It is a 64 characters in length. As you can see on the screen, it is an example of the invoice reference number. It is a combination of the GST and financial year document type and document number. There is no duplication of the IRN. Digital signature. All the e-invoices are to be validated by using the digital signature and the IRP using the private key. This digitally signed JSON is then made available to the supplier in form of output. This digital signature should not be confused with the digital signature of supplier. It is the digital signature of the invoice registration portal. QR code. QR code is the quick response code. It is a two-dimensional barcode. The purpose of QR code is to get the quick information via the machinery. It basically GST of the supplier and buyer, invoice details, date of invoice generation, value, HSN code, unique registration number, every detail is embedded in the QR code. It basically increases the efficiency of conducting via machines to capture data. What are the data embedded in QR code? This is the list of data which is embedded in the QR code. By scanning the QR code, you get all these information. QR code in e-invoicing versus dynamic QR code. Dynamic QR code is something which is applicable to registered person above 500 crores. Dynamic QR code is mandatory for B2C supplies. That is only for digitalized payment. Digitalized payment. When you get the e-invoice from the company, if there is a dynamic QR code, you can pay directly via scanning it. It should not be confused with the QR code under e-invoicing. QR code under e-invoicing gives only the data of the invoice, whereas dynamic QR code gives the payment gateways link. This is the format or example of an e-invoice. As you can see, there is a QR code and the reference number, and it is digitally signed by NIC. That is the invoice registration portal. Time limits under e-invoicing. As of now, any invoice greater than 1st October 2020, basically from the start of the e-invoicing, can be registered. There's no limit to the current year. Basically, that will be introduced later. If required, IRNs can be cancelled within 24 hours. This is the utmost important thing. IRN can be cancelled only within 24 hours from generation. Even though IRN is cancelled, same document cannot be generated again for the same registered person. If e-way bill is generated, then e-way bill first needs to be cancelled, then e-invoice needs to be cancelled. If e-way bill cannot be cancelled, then e-invoice cannot be cancelled. IRN details will be available at the portal only for 2 days. Validation and calculation. Before registering the invoice, some basic validation needs to be done. Basically, this is done by the invoice registration portal or the offline utility which we can use. Validation in the sense calculations and other round of things. Certain values such as TDS, there are no other column. So these are to be put in the other charges or discount as applicable. Challenges and problem. If a person to whom e-invoicing is applicable does not prepare e-invoice according to the subrule 4, then such invoice is not an valid invoice. Hence, the person to whom he supplies, he cannot take the ITC. So for every supplier, applicability check needs to be done. Complications while integrating ERP system. Now you have to integrate your system with the e-invoicing system. Cancellation and amendments not possible. Within 24 hours, you can cancel it. Amendment is not possible. Either it is full cancellation or no cancellation. Within 24 hours, full cancellation can be done. Partial cancellation not possible. Complications in reconciliation of e-invoice data, like from the book of accounts, e-invoice, GSTR1, e-way bill portal. Now, alternative arrangements for data needs to be done because e-invoice portal will store data only for 24 hours. Thank you. With this, I conclude my today's topic. In case of any doubts or queries, you can contact me on this number. Thank you. Thank you, CS Sansaar team. Please do subscribe to their channel.